maturity required to take standardized testing. Most of the people don't realize that the United States is the most test-happy society on the planet. We test earlier and more often than most countries in the world. It was reported that America used $700 million in 2011 to develop and administer pre-kindergarten assessment and kindergarten readiness tests. The National Education Policy, No Child Left Behind, has recently been trying to push the proposal to extend standardized testing to preschoolers. The government spends nearly $7 billion annually toward Head Start, a program that tests children in elementary from ages 4 to 11. There has been multiple objections of most leading early childhood experts and even members of its own Head Start panel advising against testing preschoolers. A Washington elementary school canceled testing kindergartners after 80% of the parents decided to opt out. The National Association of Education of Young Children issued a statement of concern regarding testing affecting preschoolers' mental health. Brain research suggests that too much stress is mentally and physically harmful. When stress becomes overwhelming, the brain shifts into a fight or flight response when it is impossible to engage in the higher order thinking, hindering them from responding correctly to the standardized questions. According to Laura Nicholson from Department of Psychology, her research on children shows that the prevalence of test anxiety in primary school is increasing, and it is common for children to develop mental problems. According to Thomas Armstrong, special education from the University of Massachusetts explained that during the time that a child is taking a test, he or she could be doing something far more valuable. We should wait to test children until they are more mature and developed. This would decrease the ongoing reports of children in preschool developing mental illnesses from testing. We should focus more on teaching the curriculum than testing. This is my sources.
Should the STAR test be the judgment on if Texas middle school students will advance to the next grade? So the STAR test is not an accurate representation of a child's success during the year. John Tanner is a man that manages 40 school districts, so he has probably a good perspective on this topic of STAR tests. One of the biggest problems he found is that the STAR test in the Texas school system is the STAR test. He gave many reasons in his article for why the STAR test is not an accurate representation of a child's success, and it should be changed in order to give a fair chance to the students. So he said that each STAR score is an estimate and an estimate only and should be treated as such. Though simple, this quote shows that it's an important part that the school system needs to realize. The STAR test is not perfect, as it does not represent all of the school curriculum. There are many cases in which this has been shown to be true. Some of them have been teachers vouching that their students who have been paying attention, getting good grades, have not done well in these STAR tests. This leads on to my next topic, in which we can see that students' mental health are being harmed. STAR tests, students' mental states are being harmed due to the faulty test. So the STAR test, as we know, does not correctly represent the school's curriculum and that they teach the kids. Diligent kids, as I said in my last slide, have been failing these standardized tests due to the school's curriculum not matching up with the STAR test curriculum. The IDRA has said that many teachers and students are being distressed due to the students not doing well. The teachers are judged on whether the students do well, and the students in general are being judged for their performance. Kids can't be expected to do well on a test that has not been perfectly matching to the STAR test to the school's curriculum. This leads to unnecessary stress that a middle school student shouldn't have. A test that decides if a kid passes or fails can even be compared to a college entrance exam. A middle schooler who is just taking a test to pass a grade should not have that much stress. So the conclusion and solution that I came up with is the solution is that Texas Education Agency, which is the TAA, should implement different ways that a student could pass a grade. So the STAR test is only an estimate, as I said in my first slide, and should only be treated as one. This means that we should also implement GPA into passing a student. And that means that the kids will try harder throughout the year in school and pay more attention, and they will be less stressed for the STAR test as it's a balanced system. These are my sources.
So the next topic would be, are standardized tests such as SAT and ACT disadvantage to students when applying to college? Schools nowadays are teaching students just how to take tests and memorize sets of numbers and words, and they're unable to indulge in a fulfilling process of learning and enrichment. When they're taught to just memorize and pass, they're not taught the curriculum that they are led to think is very useful in their future. Thomas Armstrong, the executive director of the American Institute for Learning and Human Development, highlights that standardized tests reduce the richness of human experience and human learning to a number of set of numbers. SATs and ACTs are just a way for large corporations to make profit. With every test being taken, money goes straight to corporations that claim to be nonprofit. Depending on how many times a student takes the test, businesses can continue to profit off of what they call their failures. These tests are supposed to create an even playing field for students to compete, but instead greatly disadvantaged low-income households. W. James Popham, a UCLA emeritus professor, introduces that all standardized tests are made by big corporations that are for-profit businesses. And the SATs and ACTs create a big gap between higher income and lower income households. Depending on a household's average income, students can take the test multiple times. This disadvantages students in lower income households because of their inability to afford multiple attempts. This means that higher income households can afford to take the test up to as many times as they want. And according to Zachary A. Goldfarb in his Washington Post article, students from families earning more than $200,000 a year average a combined score of 1714, while students from families earning under $20,000 a year average a combined score of 1326. So the current solutions that we have right now are that many smaller colleges are going what they call test blind and instead hold interviews with their applicants. But at the moment, the solutions are still limited. Schools are currently omitting the SAT and ACT score submission for their applications. But this isn't a conventional approach for larger private or public colleges, and they now are focusing more on GPAs and extracurriculars. Here are my works cited.
How does GPA compare to test scores on college applications, and what are some challenges faced during the testing process? So SAT and ACT scores and GPA have been proven to have a direct effect on graduation percentages. So both SAT and ACT scores are associated with the likelihood that students will graduate with a bachelor's degree. But when you look at them side by side, GPA has a much stronger effect on when people graduate. If you look on the next slide, you see a graph, and you can clearly see that GPA has a large effect on the graduation. Whether if you look at SAT scores, they don't really have a large effect on it, and yeah. A disadvantage that students face during SAT and ACT. Time restraints. Time restraints are a major issue surrounding the SAT itself. You receive 4 hours in total. However, you are forced to work on certain sections in a specific time limit. You are also unable to work ahead or go back. Placing students under this time restraint gives unadded stress and makes room for unnecessary mistakes. Adding additional time or removing the inability to work ahead allows students to be more logical in their answers and showcase their skills rather than failing simple questions. How can we solve this? You should have colleges rely on other elements that are of equal value. For example, extracurriculars, GPA, letters of recommendation from teachers, what courses you select, demonstrated interest of colleges, and committed volunteering. And those are my citations. And the solution that our group came up with is that for younger children, they should be taught more about each subject's curriculum rather than how to take a standardized test, such as the STAR. For middle school and higher education, standardized testing and GPA should be brought into account for passing to the next grade, college, etc. And for college admission and further education, tests such as the SAT and ACT should have a lesser focus.